Hello there and welcome to the Banyen Books and Sound video podcast. My name is Ross McKeachie and I'm joined today by Yogacharini Maitreyi, who hails from South India. She's well recognized in South India. She's been given many titles in the traditional yogic lineages there. Yoga Shiromani, Yoga Gem, Yoga Chemal, Yoga Expert, and Yogacharini, which is the feminine form of Yogacharini, which means a life guide on the path of yoga. Delighted to have you here with us today. She also happens to be my teacher, so I'm really excited to be able to interview you. Namaste and
Namaste,
welcome.
Ross, and namaste, everyone.
So maybe you can tell us, you're the founder of Archaea Yoga, and maybe you can tell us just briefly what is Archaea.
So Archa is one of the names of the sun, which means light, healing, and inspiration, and Archaea is unto the light. So whatever we do in our lives, we become a channel of that light. So it is I would say, a holistic form of yoga where you're looking at all the aspects, all the Ashtangas, and meditation is part of that yogic system. Pranayama is part of that yogic system. Asanas for the purpose of liberation is part of that yogic system. So it has all the tools and principles to go in a step-by-step manner to reconnect to self. So self means the body, the emotions, the mind. And we're living in a world where I would say, which breeds a lot of disconnection. So I would say step-by-step reconnecting to self and then expanding.
Beautiful. So that really leads into the next question, which is, how do we discern authentic yoga versus what we're seeing in the West, which is very much a physical fitness oriented yoga?
That's a good question, because many times I'm happy yoga is spread in the West because it's such a big thing and everybody understands the word, but nobody understands the essence. So yoga fitness, I would prefer people calling it asana fitness or something to that extent. So in yoga, even in asana, actually, if you see the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the idea or behind asana is to tap into our state of being, the still space where the dualities merge, which is the foundation of Tantra as well. So when we have the separation or disconnection between the top and bottom, then we're saying, okay, when we move the top, let's bring the head to the toes, or head to the thigh and hands to the toes. So two extremities are coming together in a very tangible, practical way in yoga. And that movement is powered by the breath. So once again, we see this union or yuj, which means the mind is not saying, oh, I want to lose 10 kilos in 10 days, or I want to be like this super yogi. There's no pushing, which we're so used to, but pacing ourselves and taking things step by step. And because we do that, that same ethos gets translated onto our lives. Otherwise, we're constantly dancing to everybody else's tunes. The media's, our own unconscious desires, which were thrust either by parents or peers, or which may not be healthy for us. So we have the capacity to slow down, to savor, and therefore we actually speed up our evolution.
Beautiful. Okay, so that just brought up one other question in my mind, which is the nervous system and the impact that practicing from a pushing, where we're using our mind to push the body, versus the body and mind working together, and the impact that actually has on the nervous system.
Yes, no, that's a very good thing to look at, because most people's nervous system is really, really agitated and not ready for real yoga. Because in real self-awareness, you have to have a certain degree of stillness, or I would say a certain degree of calmness, to be able to see yourself. Otherwise, the minute you witness yourself or you see yourself, you're going to go into these old patterns of self-judgment, self-hate, condemnation, or it'll be identification. You're so strongly identified with form, be it, oh, I am Indian, or I am Canadian, or whatever it is, Sometimes people are very proud of it, which is great. I'm not saying you shouldn't be proud, but it shouldn't be a factor of separation. It shouldn't be, oh, I'm a woman, so men against women. No, we of course talk about issues that are pertinent to our form, which means being a man or a woman or being from a particular country, but that doesn't become a divisive factor. Similarly, when we identify with certain qualities, I have people I worked with, not always older, but usually when they're older, oh, this is how I've lived all my life, or this is me, I'm this kind of a person, I'm an angry kind of a person, so they identify so much with that habit or quality that they think that is them without seeing it's a pattern or a conditioning. So first I was talking about this condemnation, second identification, and third justification. So again, if the nervous system is not calm, then we look at something and then we make a whole lot of excuses for our behavior, even though it's a behavior that has crossed somebody's boundaries, or we're stealing energy from a group or from someone else, then we constantly justify it. And I've seen it with people who have trauma. Oh, I'm so traumatized. Yes, you are traumatized. We have a lot of compassion for that. But at some point, your trauma shouldn't be leaking so much that it's poisoning someone else, like anger or frustration. So this calm nervous system is very, very, very important for the purpose of self-awareness.
Okay, great, thank you. I think you're getting into some points there about the requirements of a student on the path and what they need to cultivate to be an authentic student on the yoga path or any spiritual path with a certain amount of maturity. So a lot of people, we're always questioning gurus and teachers and putting them under the microscope. But let's turn it around for a moment and say, okay, what does an authentic teacher on a real path in a lineage look for in a good student?
It depends on the sort of class. For a regular class, everyone is welcome. Because yes, everybody needs to understand the true ethos of yoga. So that I would not say there is a certain requirement, because it's gentle, mindful. But let's say it's the teacher training that I teach. There is a certain baseline that I expect, because if they're leaking energy or they're leaking anger or frustration, I don't want to put them out there where they can use their students as a punching bag. So if I already see it in the teacher training that they do not have a capacity for self-awareness and then self-correction, then that's not an ideal student for me.
Okay, and what about for any of our viewers out there who are just wondering, okay, I've been taking yoga classes for a long time. I'm thinking about being a little bit more committed to my practice at home and to my own evolution. And I'm curious about finding a teacher. What kind of qualities should they cultivate in order to make themselves ready for that kind of a commitment?
Yeah, so the first is commitment.
Right. Okay.
You said it already. So we know it's a commitment, but a lot of people believe, I think now with all these instant fixes and, weekend enlightenment workshops, people are like, oh, okay, why does it have to take so long? So yoga is a path which takes time to unravel this loop of loneliness we've created in our systems, which is so tightly knotted up. And gently and slowly we have to unknot these misperceptions. So the lens has been clouded over many, many, many years. And therefore, to do it gently, we need a certain degree of time to release this conditioning, to release this lens or this veil through which we view the world and we view ourselves. So that is a very, very important aspect of yoga. Of course, if I'm teaching exercise yoga, I can say, okay, over 2 weekends, I'll give you like 2 routines and, that's done. But that's not where the tradition I come from. So basically, I'd like to take them in a deeper way to understand themselves. And that takes time.
Right. Okay.
So I'm just going to add to that. And how do they prepare themselves? I would say is getting a certain degree of emotional management tools, because I find people on the spiritual path, they somehow think spirituality is removed from the material world. So the emotions are very, very connected to our spiritual process. And therefore, that's an important key, I would say.
Okay, thank you. So you've basically touched on the longer commitment that's required and sort of saying, you know, this instant enlightenment concept that we're sold a lot of the time for weekend workshops and this sort of thing is not true. Can you talk a little bit about this, what you've witnessed in the West around the idea of instant enlightenment?
Yeah, so when I first came to the West to teach, I was quite surprised at the number of enlightened people that I... Simply because everybody was enlightened, you know, they had an enlightenment experience. Of course, in India, you don't talk about it like that. You study for years and years and lifetimes, and you still, even if you've had these experiences, they are not something to define you as being enlightened. Yes, you've had a psychic experience, you know that you're out of body. I've had many, many experiences as a child, but that doesn't become a point of elevation. It becomes a point of saying, okay, I'm not my body, which I know for sure. Just as I have a hand, I know I have spirit, and because I've had out of body experiences, I know I'm not this body. So it becomes an expansive experience for sure, you know? But in terms of an enlightenment experience, there needs to be a lot of purification and a lot of integration or integrity of that person, which I don't see.
Can you define for us this term purification? Because I think there might be people that have had trauma from religious organizations where the term purification or purity might be loaded for some people.
Yes,
so can you
no,
give us like the practical understanding of what that means?
Yes, so let's say on a practical level, we're just being aware of the foods we eat. So they're not laden with junk foods. So when you go on a little bit of a detox, it's again I'm not from an ascetic tradition. So it doesn't mean like, you know, I don't eat at all. I used to go on long fasts, certain points, but it's savoring your food and eating healthier, organic, alive foods. So just making choices about your foods, as simple as that with your body. Giving it enough rest. Of course, sometimes, you know, you'll go to bed late, you have some work to do, but at least you're saying, okay, I did this, so let me treat my body well for the next few days. So it's just having that cognizance or having that awareness. On an emotional level, if you're observing there's a lot of grief, there's something, not labeling it, not condemning it, but saying, yes, I will acknowledge this emotion, I will embrace this emotion, I will release and refine this emotion rather than suppressing it. Now, the more the emotion is suppressed, it will mutate. It will take all these crazy forms, and before you know it, either it will kill you or it will kill somebody else. So, I mean, or it will create pain. I'm exaggerating,
right.
But it would create all these imbalances in the system.
So on an emotional level, that's purification, is actually processing and releasing the emotions.
So that's a big portion that, you know, I find is missing, and of course the thought process as well, because if we have a lot of unconscious, repetitive thoughts that are unhealthy, then of course we're creating that vibration. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean by being conscious and detoxing, a detox of the body, mind, emotions.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So a detox on all levels.
Yes.
Okay. So that's another way to define purification.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. You've commented on a few things that make me think about Tantra. And I know that's another loaded term here in the West. All you out there, listen to this one. What is real Tantra versus what is being sold as Tantra here in the West, which is this. For anybody who doesn't know, in the West, what we're being sold as Tantra is very much this, it's all about sex. So can you just define for us what authentic Tantra is?
Sure. It's kind of, I would say, unfortunate what each culture picks and sensationalizes. Like in India, if you look at Tantra now, not a lot of people go and study with the guru. So what happens is it's Bollywood and, you know, a lot of the television serials that propagate what Tantra means. So these movies or serials have, you know, like shows, have taken on the darker side of Tantra, which means somebody sitting, you know, in black, wearing skulls and a hroom, and, you know, they'll do all that and they'll cast a spell on somebody. So it's become the magic, black magic side of it.
This is in India?
In India.
Right, okay.
So I'm like, oh my God, I thought if I come to the West at least, you know, I could start using the word Tantra. And here I was like, oh my God, there it's so tamasic. And here it's so rajasic in terms of the aspect of Tantra. I'm saying, I'm not talking about the people. The aspect of Tantra that has been picked out to be taught. There, nobody teaches Tantra like that, It's the movies I'm talking about.
Right.
Whereas here, the workshops are all focused on the sexual aspect of it. So if you look at the word Tantra itself, it's this weaving together of these polarities. Which basically means yoga, union, yuj, coming together. And in Hindi, if you see, Tan means body, man means mind. So Tantra is to liberate the body, through the body, embracing the body, and mantra is to liberate the mind, man. So both these are very, very, I would say, beautiful tools to not negate the material world, but to embrace it and say, okay, I have tools to shift this old vibrational quality that is there and to allow the cosmos to guide me. Otherwise, it's our conditioning that's guiding us. That's why when people throw out these common, sayings, oh, everything will guide me. I'm like, no, it's the conditioning that's guiding you. For some, it's pretty obvious. Oh, people just want to keep on smoking, and it's like, oh, I'm being guided. No. So only when there's a certain degree of detoxification and discernment can you see, are you being guided by this old conditioning, this old unresolved obsession with sex, this old unresolved, I wouldn't say unresolved, but fascination with black magic, So what is it that's constantly making you go there? Rather than saying, I want to unite with the divine, I want to detoxify, I want to integrate. So yes, coming back to your question about the West, that isn't Tantra at all, because sex is just one aspect of what you do with the body. You eat with the body, you sit with the body, you breathe with the body. You do so many things with the body. And sex is one aspect where you're being aware, how am I engaging? So the first step before you engage is to be aware of the energy within. If you have no awareness of your own energy, you're going to engage in ways where you either steal energy or have energy stolen from you. It's not going to be a balanced, uplifting relationship. And to put it in layman's terms, I can just say, oh, what if you get into an abusive relationship? And kind of say, oh, I'm guided by the universe and I have to stick in it forever. We all know that's not true. We know that if you've had an abusive parent, then somehow we're wired to attract that into our life. And to that extent that we've been abused, we may attract that kind of an abusive partner. So it's good to step back, again, witness ourselves and say, okay, this is not higher guidance. This is a big boundary being crossed. Do I really need this? And step away. So similarly in Tantra, I would say people need to step back, especially if sex is being sold as the primary reason for it. Tantra is for liberation. One of the aspects is sex.
Does a Tantra teacher ever ask you to have sex with them, an authentic Tantra teacher? Okay.
No. I mean, that's the most ridiculous thing I've heard when people, I would say ridiculous, and I have a lot of compassion.
Right.
I won't mention the store. I was just there, and I met one of the girls who came for my talk at Banyen, actually. And she was sitting there alone, and I just said hello, and she said hello, and she just kept looking at me, and so I said, oh, okay, maybe she wants to chat, and she did want to chat. So she's like, yeah, how did you know? And I was like, no, you were just looking at me, so it kind of felt. And then she shared this whole story about this Tantra teacher. She's studying in with Thailand. She travels there, and how this guy's been hitting on her. And he and his girlfriend have an open relationship, and she's really young. This guy's much older. So I was like, do you want to engage with him? She was like, no, I don't want to. I'm confused. I thought that's what Tantra is. And I was like, no, this is BS. If you go to a doctor, if you go to a therapist, if you go even to a sex therapist or a sex educator, if they want to have sex with you, run from there. I mean, we understand that. But for Tantra or I would say any other science which has the cloak of spirituality, like with what's happening with the church as well, we know, what all the priests did. This cloak of spirituality, somehow people are able to sell them non-truths. So I have a lot of compassion for people who are confused about it, But at the same time, we have to make it clear that what we don't expect from a doctor or a teacher or a therapist is unacceptable from a Tantra teacher.
Yeah, that's very clear.
Yeah.
That's very clear. So the question about Tantra and teachers wanting to sleep with their students, it's a clear and hard no, that's not acceptable. Traditional, authentic Tantra, it's just an excuse. People trying to abuse their power and under the guise of spirituality.
Yes.
So that's really clear. Everybody hears that.
Yeah.
Good. Now, what are the other signs of a fake guru or someone posing as a guru?
Yeah, I would say in yoga, in the scriptures, there is this principle of aham brahmasmi, which means I am the infinite, I am the cosmos. But that and megalomania may be very similar, with the quality or intentionality being very different in aham brahmasmi. And in megalomania, when somebody says, oh, I'm an avatar, I'm a god, I'm Shiva, I am Kalki, I am this. And there are lots of those people in India where they call themselves the next avatar. And yeah, people just giving themselves a whole load of fancy titles, I would run from there. And the other thing is also people valuing building bigger and bigger ashrams rather than valuing the people who are actually working for them. I've seen that too happen many, many times. So if their family and friends, everybody having a nice time, and then here are the people who are doing sadhana and they're not valued and they're just becoming workhorses, then that's another sign.
So kind of abusing this idea of seva or karma yoga and just overworking the volunteers.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, there's so many examples that are coming out in the news these days about gurus in India and other places, about all the abuses of young women. So it's a really important issue for people to be aware of. And maybe you can just quickly comment on the concepts of viveka and vairagya and what that means.
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. And in the teacher training, what I talk about is that the bird that flies towards liberation or moksha has two wings. One is viveka or discernment, and the other is vairagya or this capacity to step back, detachment, but the capacity to step back and look at things. And the fuel for it is abhyasa or practice. So once we have that capacity to see things clearly, and of course for that it takes a lot of pranayama to clean the lens, because sometimes we may want a father figure and then we're attracted to this guru who seems like that. So we have to be really, really careful with making this choice of saying, okay, I'm going to fully commit, and do it in a step-by-step manner. Yeah.
Beautiful, thank you. Maybe you can just briefly talk about the Archaea teacher training. I know you also have a foundation in India, the Archaea Foundation, working with youth in the slums. You're taking on creating the Archaea Awareness Center on the Sunshine Coast, starting to fundraise for that. And of course, the foundation of all of it has been the Archaea teacher training over the years. So can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the teacher training, it gives me a lot of joy because I take just a small group, as in the Gurukula system, because then I can observe each person's patterns with unconditional love from a heart-centered space. And so that they may evolve and they may change those things that create self-sabotage. And this, again, is not done in a way that's like, oh, you have to look at it. A space is created where people can self-reflect. But it is a very, very necessary component of the program. And mostly I've found people who want to do it. Of course, sometimes they struggle because they were like, oh my God, I didn't think I had to see all these things about myself. But when I constantly repeat the principles, no, watch yourself without shaming or blaming, it's their work to do, it's not my work to do. And there will be the rare soul, I would say, that because of years of shame and blame will project it onto those in the class or onto me, where I have to have a clear boundary. But mostly they've been wonderful because they're small groups. We have an interaction with them, talk to them, tell them, this is what it entails, and it's in 4 modules. So again, over the 4 modules, I can see how the person is taking things in, how the person is later on in module 4 being proactive. So module 1 is foundations, module 2 is basically a healing retreat, Module 3 is an immersion. So they have space between each of them to integrate as well. And they're learning about this entire, what it means to be human, this entire spectrum of being human and connected to the divine.
Beautiful, thank you. I think that's our time, Maitreyi. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.
And I'll just tell everyone, if you're interested in learning more about Archaea or the teacher training, which happens over a year's time, you can visit www.archaea.net. That's ARKAYA.net. And those of you in the Lower Mainland, please come down to Banyen Books and Sound at West 4th and Dunbar. And if you're not in Vancouver, you can check us out online, banyen.com, and you can buy all sorts of goodies on there and see the great events that are happening. Thank you very much.
Namaste.